Is cadre deployment rotting South Africa from the inside out? It's the ANC's worst kept secret and arguably the most destructive policy. Because for decades, the ruling party has treated government as a jobs for friends scheme, handing positions of power to loyal ANC cadres whether or not they qualified. And now we're living with the fallout of rolling blackouts, dry taps, rising unemployment, corruption, and streets overrun by crime. But before we get into how it's affecting South Africa, let's look at what exactly is cadre deployment. In simple terms, it's the ANC's policy of deploying its members or their cadres into key jobs across the country. Instead of hiring the best person for the job, the ANC makes sure a loyal comrade gets the position. This happens in government departments, state-owned companies, and municipalities. So basically, everywhere. And it's not a conspiracy theory, it's openly stated in ANC policy. In fact, back in 1997, at its Mafikeng conference, the ANC formally resolved to set up deployment committees at every level of the party to decide who goes into what job in public service. And since the late 90s, an ANC committee has been deciding who runs your city, who runs Eskom, who becomes a judge or an ambassador. They even planted themselves into supposedly independent institutions and businesses. And it claimed it was to drive transformation and represent the people. The resolution even warned that they should do checks and guard against favoritism. But in practice, cadre deployment has become a license to hire buddies and cronies, sidestepping open hiring processes. And so, over the years, this policy has implanted a culture of patronage. If you're loyal to the ANC, especially one who's done favors or sung the right praises, you stand a good chance of getting a cushy post in a government where competence is optional and loyalty is mandatory. Former President Jacob Zuma openly defended cadre deployment as essential so that the ANC can rule everywhere. And the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, who ironically once chaired the ANC's deployment committee, admitted in testimony that, yes, we do deploy comrades into state positions. Now, for a long time, cadre deployment was just accepted as how things are done in South Africa. But then the wheels came off. In the 2010s, we saw an explosion of corruption and state capture, looting on a grand scale, and people started connecting the dots. A big state capture investigation, led by Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, didn't hold back when it came to how cadres were used. In his final report released back in 2022, Judge Zondo effectively declared the ANC's cadre deployment policy unlawful and unconstitutional because it simply violates the basic principle that public service appointments must be made on merit, not party loyalty. Let's take a look at what was said in Parliament.
Over the past term, this Parliament has repeatedly been presented with evidence of the devastating consequences of cadre deployment. The Zondo Commission found that cadre deployment laid the foundation for state capture. The National Framework for the Professionalization of the Public Sector recommended, and I quote, that deployment practices ought to be ditched in favor of merit-based recruitment and selection systems. Earlier this month, the Supreme Court of Appeal confirmed that it is illegal for the ANC to keep cadre deployment records secret from the people of South Africa because it impacts on service delivery.
Now, Zondo's report basically confirmed what many suspected. Cadre deployment greased the wheels of state capture and corrupted almost every part of the public sector. It led to massive looting and the collapse of institutions because people in key roles either didn't know how to do their jobs or were more interested in serving the parties and their own financial interest than serving the public. Judge Zondo recommended that cadre deployment be scrapped altogether, and this was a huge bombshell, a formal recommendation that the ANC abandon one of its core practices. So what did the ANC actually do? They simply rejected it outright. Now, the ANC's response was basically, we hear you, but no, we'll deploy whoever we want. In fact, even while Zondo was calling cadre deployment unconstitutional, the ANC was doubling down. They basically said that they would continue to implement the cadre deployment policy come hell or high water. So then in February 2024, the Constitutional Court then ordered the ANC to hand over all cadre deployment records from January 2013 onward, which is when Cyril Ramaphosa became chair of the deployment committee. The highest court in the land gave them 5 days to comply, and DA MP Leon Schreiber said that this was about letting people see how the ANC's deployment committee interferes in appointments, shining a light on the behind the closed doors manipulation that had the groundwork for state capture. And surprise, surprise, when forced to hand over these records, the ANC suddenly claimed that the whole chunk of them was missing. In fact, they couldn't produce any minutes from the entire period between 2013 and 2018, the peak state capture years when Zuma was president and Ramaphosa was deployment chief. How convenient. 5 years worth of deployment committee minutes have apparently vanished into thin air. And it doesn't take a genius to guess why. Those records likely would show exactly how they put easily influenced cadres into key jobs, perhaps even names of people who greased the wheels for the Guptas and other crooks. Then the DA also went to court to outlaw cadre deployment altogether and even put up a billboard to make the message clear. In court, they argued that cadre deployment violates the Constitution and leads to unfair discrimination in public hiring and contributes directly to corruption and maladministration. This case was heard in the Gauteng High Court, and frankly, the outcome was huge disappointment. In February 2024, a full bench of the High Court dismissed the DA's case, refusing to declare the policy unconstitutional. The judges basically said that the DA hadn't provided enough proof that cadre deployment itself is to blame for corruption and state capture. But let's talk about the real-world impact of cadre deployment. The failures in service delivery, the weakened economy, the safety issues, they're all tied to putting unqualified and often corrupt people in charge instead of honest experts. Take Eskom, for example. This crisis didn't come out of nowhere. Years of cadre deployment at Eskom helped cause it, where we had executives appointed because of their loyalty rather than their ability to run a power station. And under Zuma's era, Eskom's top leadership was basically handpicked to enable looting. Remember Brian Molefe and Matsela Koko, implicated in all sorts of corruption with the Guptas. Even after Zuma, the culture is hard to reverse. President Ramaphosa appointed a new board with some engineers, but also ANC-connected people without energy experience. And the result is that Eskom couldn't keep the lights on. Our power stations literally crumble due to mismanagement and sabotage. And who suffers the consequences? All of us. The economy has lost hundreds of billions of rands due to load shedding. But what about the municipalities? Well, cadre deployment has destroyed local government, perhaps the worst of it all. The ANC has deployed mayors, municipal managers, and technical officers who often have zero clue of how to deliver these services. And of course, you've already seen the outcome of this. In 2023, we saw a deadly cholera outbreak in Hammanskraal, where at least 21 people died from contaminated water. That's something you expect in a war-torn or extremely poor country. And why did it happen? Because the local wastewater treatment wasn't maintained for years. And the worst part of it all was that there was an actual budget created for this maintenance. But then the question is, where did all that money go? Well, into the pockets of cronies through a corrupt tender. The company that was paid to fix the water plant was linked to Edwin Sodi, a businessman notorious for ANC tender scandals. The work was never properly done and the plant remained dysfunctional. Now, across the country, similar stories come up. You have municipalities where sewage treatment doesn't work and water pumps are broken, so people go weeks without running water. Roads have disintegrated into potholes because the guy in charge of public works got the job via Cadre deployment and knows nothing about engineering or maintenance. Now, add crime into this mix, where our police and security services have not been spared of Cadre deployment. So the question then is, do you feel safe? Because most people don't. In fact, South Africa has one of the highest murder rates in the world, with around 70 people being murdered every single day on average. It's completely out of control, and part of the reason is that policing is ineffective when leadership is politicized. We've had national police commissioners appointed not because they were good cops, but because they had political connections. And then there's years after the Guptas looted billions. How many politicians are orange suited in jail? Virtually none. Not one of the ANC bigwigs who enabled state capture is behind bars as we speak. Former President Zuma was jailed for contempt of court for a few months, but not for the actual corruption. The likes of Ace Magashule, Mosebenzi, Malusi are sitting at home or even campaigning again. And when you think about it, cadre deployment isn't just about getting your buddy a job. It's also about creating a network of loyalty where nobody will hold their fellow comrades accountable. It's like a mafia where you don't rat on your family. And this seems to have been the ANC's modus operandi, and South Africa has paid the price in justice deferred. But let's put some numbers to this misery. Unemployment in South Africa is around 32% officially, which personally I think is much higher. That's 1 in every 3 people who want to work but can't find a job. This is shocking for a country that's not at war. And it's even worse for the youth. Roughly 60% of young people are unemployed. An entire generation is sitting at home with no prospects. Meanwhile, many of those who have jobs in the public sector might not even be qualified for them. An interesting statistic is that we've lost nearly 1 million citizens to immigration since 2000. Many of them highly educated, hardworking people who just got fed up. And a recent survey found that 1 in 4 South Africans have considered emigrating, with the top reasons being corruption, lack of opportunity, and an unsafe environment. Then there's the economy side of things, where the country has been stuck in low growth limbo for over a decade. Rising debt, junk status on our credit, all partly due to the fallout from state capture era where cadre deployment was enabled. Now, politically, there's a big sign that South Africans are finally saying enough. In the 2024 national election, the ANC's vote share plunged to around 40%, which is the first time it's ever dropped below 50%. And why did this happen? Well, voters were angry over failed economic and social policies. That's a polite way of saying that the people are fed up with unemployment, corruption, crime, and blackouts, all the result of ANC's mismanagement. But where does this leave us then? Well, it leaves us ordinary South Africans with a clear choice and voice to raise. We must demand an end to cadre deployment at every opportunity. Support leaders and parties that vow to appoint people based on ability, not loyalty. And we've seen some progress. The ANC is now on the back foot electorally, and their cadre deployment secrets are being dragged into the sunlight bit by bit. Public opinion has shifted. Even people who once defended the ANC are horrified by the decay in our country. And ending cadre deployment is not a magic bullet that will fix South Africa overnight, but it's a necessary first step.